Hello, and welcome back to the Mythical Madam. I'm June, your host. And before we dive into today's chaos, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for letting these weird, wonderful stories drop anchor in your mind, even when there's already a whole sea of other things fighting for space. Whether this is your first episode or you've been here since the beginning. Seriously, you deserve the world, and I'm so glad you're here to join me. This is episode 5, which feels like a tiny, minuscule, and speck of a milestone, but one I don't take lightly. Because these aren't just stories to me. These are pieces of history, of belief, of imagination. Stories that have crossed generations, cultures, and oceans. Stories that have stayed with people long after they were first told. And maybe if I'm lucky, they'll stay with you too. Welcome to the Mythical Madam, my little corner of the internet where we sip on a bit of curiosity and wander into the eerie, the haunting, and the beautifully strange. So if you're ready for a little chaos, a little darkness, and yes, plenty of my unsolicited thoughts along the way, get cozy and settle in wherever you are. Welcome to the Mythical Madam podcast, where we share the myths, the mysteries, and oh yes, the mess. Today's story, it doesn't come crashing in with thunder. It doesn't scream, it doesn't chase. It stands still, quiet, familiar, until it isn't. This is the tale of the Noppera-bō, Japan's faceless ghost, a spirit that doesn't need violence to terrify you, only a face you'll never forget, because it isn't there at all. Even their name gives you a hint of what's coming. Noppera-bō comes from the Japanese word nopperi, meaning featureless or smooth, and bo, meaning person or figure. Put them together and you get exactly what you're up against, a human-shaped presence, blank, empty, and disturbingly smooth. No eyes, no mouth, no nose, just skin stretched over where a face should be. And when you realize you're talking to one, it hits differently. Welcome to episode 5. Picture this in your mind for a second. You're walking home at night. The streets are empty. The moon's out. Maybe there's a light drizzle, because of course, rain makes everything spookier. You can see someone standing by the roadside. A woman maybe? Or a man in traveler's clothes. Nothing weird at first, right? They're just there. Maybe they even smile at you. But as you get closer, they turn to face you fully, and you realize there's nothing there. No eyes staring back at you. No face at all. That's the Noppera-bō. Also called the Mujina in some older stories. Though, fun fact, that name could also mean a badger or a raccoon dog spirit depending on the region. More on that later because Japanese folklore loves to keep us confused. But at its core, the Noppera-bō is known for one thing: being human until they're not. So here's the thing about the Noppera-bō. They're not violent. They're not going to claw their way through your bedroom window. They're not going to hover at the foot of your bed at 3 a.m., whispering curses in your ears. They're not even going to chase you down the street in some dramatic horror movie sprint. No, the Noppera-bō plays a much quieter game. And honestly, that might be much worse. Because their weapon of choice, it's not claws, it's not chains, it's doubt. Their entire haunting is built on the idea of making you question yourself, what you saw, what you trusted, who you thought you were speaking to. They specialize in what I could only describe as emotional sabotage, a psychological haunting, a slow, deliberate unraveling of the uncertainty we all depend on just to get through the day. These are the stories where the Noppera-bō doesn't show up as just some ominous, shadowy figure at a distance. No, they show up as someone you know, your neighbor, a stranger you greeted at the market, maybe even a loved one, standing right in front of you, smiling, familiar and safe. And it's only as the conversation goes on, only as you lean in, as you share a moment that should feel normal, that the horror begins. Maybe at first it's just the eyes that blur, the mouth softening at the edges, the details of the face starting to lose their shape, like a reflection in water when the surface ripples. Then, by the time you realize what's happening, it's already too late. There's nothing left. No expression. No features. Just skin. Smooth. Blank. Unreadable. But here's the kicker. In some versions of these stories, the Noppera-bō doesn't reveal itself right away. They'll hold a full-on conversation with you. Maybe ask you for directions, comment on the weather, share pleasantries as if they're just another traveler passing through. And you'll feel safe, maybe at ease. You'll feel that the story you've been trained your whole life to believe, that a familiar face means there's nothing to fear. Until suddenly, mid-sentence, you catch it. That terrible moment when your brain catches up to what your eyes are seeing. There is no face. And in that instance, everything collapsed. The reality you thought you were standing in, gone. Because now, it's not just about the stranger in front of you, it's about you. How long were you fooled? How did you miss it? How could something so wrong feel so normal? The Noppera-bō doesn't need to lay a hand on you. They don't need to scream. All they have to do is let you believe, even for a moment, that you're safe, that the person standing before you is human, that they're knowable, understandable, familiar. And then they take that belief away. It's disorienting, it's humiliating, and it's terrifying in a way that sticks long after the ghost is gone. Because the Noppera-bō doesn't just haunt the moment, they haunt your memory of it. Now, one of the most well-known stories about the Noppera-bō, the one that shows up again and again, is the tale of the fisherman at the Kawa River. This version was first popularized by Lafcadio Hearn in the early 1900s in his collection called Kwaiden Stories and Studies of Strange Things. Hearn lived in Matsue in the Shimane prefecture of western Japan, and many of the stories he recorded were gathered from the regions around there. But this particular story of the faceless figure is most often tied to Tokyo, specifically near what is known now as the Kawa River in Akasaka, which is a district within Minato City. There's even a bronze plaque standing there today near the Akasaka Tunnel, marking the location where the ghost story supposedly took place. The fisherman's story goes a little something like this. One evening, a man decides to go fishing near the Kawa River, even though his wife warns him not to. She begs him to stay home, but he brushes her off. He heads out anyway, and along the way he passes a young woman sitting by the roadside. She lifts her head to look at him, and her face is completely smooth. Terrified, he runs, only to encounter a second figure by the riverbank, another faceless person waiting for him. And by the time he finally stumbles back home, shaking and gasping for air, his wife rushes to meet him at the door. And as she's asking him what's wrong, she lifts her own head, and he sees she too has no face. It's the same core horror, but depending on where you hear it, the setting changes. The riverbank, the dark tunnel, the roadside at dusk. But there's an even darker version of the legend, one that just doesn't stop at you seeing a faceless figure. In some tellings, the Noppera-bō can steal your face. The story goes like this. A lone traveler encounters what seems like a normal person on a quiet road. They talk, they share a few words. Maybe it's a greeting, maybe it's asking for directions. But somewhere during the conversation, the traveler notices something wrong. The other person's face slowly softening, smoothing out, until it's gone completely. Panicked, the traveler flees, rushing home, desperate to put a distance between themselves and whatever that thing was. But when they finally reach a mirror, they realize with a jolt that they too are blank. The Noppera-bō didn't just frighten them, it took something far worse, their identity, their voice, their ability to be recognized even by themselves. In these versions, the horror isn't just what you see, it's what you lose. You don't just witness emptiness, you become it. It's a chilling twist, and one that lingers a little longer in the back of your mind. Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't being confronted by something monstrous, it's realizing you might have disappeared too. Here's another thing, that's just a couple of versions of the Noppera-bō legend. There are many other retellings across different regions of Japan, and while the face of the spirit remains smooth and blank, the details tend to shift depending on where the story is told. One of the most unsettling versions comes from the Gunma Prefecture. A frightened traveler, after a haunting roadside encounter, runs straight to a local police station for help. The officer listens quietly, patiently, and slowly turns around to reveal that he too has no face. Maybe the faces change. Maybe the roads curve differently. Maybe the river runs slower in one town than it does in another. But the truth remains. You can turn away, you can run, and still feel it following you, that empty gaze, the silent, impossible presence, waiting. Now, I've mentioned earlier that Lucadio Hearn played a big role in popularizing this story outside of Japan. When he published The Fisherman Tale, he didn't use the word Noppera-bō at all. Instead, he called the creature a Mujina. Here's where things get a little tangled. In Edo period Tokyo, what we now know today as modern-day Tokyo, the word Mujina was commonly used to describe badgers. But if you head out to Kyoto or Osaka, Mujina could just as easily mean a tanuki, those infamous shape-shifting raccoon dogs from Japanese folklore. Then in other areas like Fukuoka in Kyushu, Mujina might simply mean any kind of shapeshifter or a trickster spirit, not specifically tied to one animal. This regional mismatch led to decades of debate. Was the fisherman seeing a ghost, or was he being pranked by a badger or raccoon dog using illusion magic? Scholars argue that in the Kanto region, where Tokyo now sits, the story tends to lean toward the ghost interpretation, the Noppera-bō as an actual spirit, but in western regions like Kyoto or Osaka, the animal shapeshifter explanation holds more weight. It's one of those folkloric gray areas where the answer is both, neither, depends on where you're standing. There's another lesser-known version of the Noppera-bō legend, one that takes place not in a tea house or on a roadside, but at a quiet temple tucked into the hills of the Chiba Prefecture. A young man traveling through the countryside seeks shelter for the night. He finds a small temple, humble but well-kept, and is welcomed in by the temple keeper, a kindly old man. Grateful, the traveler accepts a place to rest. But as night falls, strange things begin to stir. The statues of the temple seem wrong. Too smooth, too blank, faces worn away by more than just time. When the traveler confronts the temple keeper about it, he asks why the statues are all faceless. The old man just smiles, and his own features slowly and silently vanish. The traveler bolts from the temple in horror, but the next morning, when villagers find him wandering the fields, he's no longer the man they remembered. His face is smooth, empty, a living statue, but walking. In some versions, the villagers say he still roams the countryside, a blank-faced pilgrim forever looking for a way home. You'd think faceless ghosts would have stayed behind in the old stories, the kind of fear that belongs to another time, when the world was smaller, darker, and yokai, or spirits, walked the edges of daily life. But the Noppera-bō, they didn't vanish. If anything, they adapted. Today, there are still whispers, so stories pass from friend to friend, traveler to traveler, but encounters with faceless figures all across Japan. One of the most famous modern hotspots, like we talked about, was the Akasaka Tunnel in Tokyo, the same area tied to that old fisherman legend. Locals say if you find yourself walking there late at night, especially near the older section of the tunnel, you might notice someone standing just a little too still. Someone who seems normal at first until they turn to face you. Drivers on the Chuo Expressway, the major highway stretching from Tokyo toward Yamanashi Prefecture, have their own stories too. Lone figures spotted standing by the roadside, hands hanging by their sides, just waiting. And when the headlights sweep over them, no face at all, just blankness. And it's just not highways and tunnels. In Fukuoka down in Kyushu, there was a newspaper article published back in the 1950s. A woman claimed she was driving home alone when she spotted someone standing directly in her headlights on a back road. She slowed down, she honked. This figure didn't move. When it finally turned, You guessed it, no face. The paper treated it like a curiosity, a piece of local color. But the woman who lived it, she insisted it was real, and she was never the same afterward. Today, if you dig into ghost forums, local blogs, even TikTok and social media threads, you'll find people still sharing similar stories. Stories of stairwells where strangers seem off, parking garages where figures appear for a moment, then vanish, public restrooms where you can catch someone in the mirror behind you, only to realize they had no face at all. The world keeps getting louder, faster, more crowded, but somehow the Noppera-bō still find their way in, still waiting in the quiet spaces we forget to guard, still standing just at the edge of where logic runs out and fear takes over. Because some ghosts don't fade with time, they evolve. But sightings are only half the story. Because when you really stop and ask the question, why do they appear? Why take a face? Why haunt the living at all? The answers get a lot murkier. Because most spirits, most monsters, at least give us something to work with. A reason, a motive. But the Noppera-bō, there's no such clarity. No backstory carved in stone. No tragic love story to cling to. Just a presence, silent, faceless, and standing too close. Some believe these spirits aren't here to punish, that they appear to those who ignore warnings, who act out of selfishness, who disrespect the spaces they move through. Like that fisherman who brushed off his wife's concern, too stubborn, too sure of himself, and in return was left staring in the blank nothingness of a faceless stranger. A warning maybe, a quiet consequence. But in so many versions of this tale, there's no wrongdoing, no crime. Sometimes the one who sees the Noppera-bō isn't guilty of anything at all. They're just there, crossing paths. And that's where the fear starts to settle in. Because what if there's no lesson to learn here? What if some hauntings aren't about you at all? What if the Noppera-bō simply exists the way a shadow exists, not asking permission, not needing a reason? There's a theory in Japanese folklore that certain spirits aren't malicious or intentional. They're echoes, residue, pieces of energy caught between the living world and whatever comes next. Not every ghost has a message. Not every spirit has a purpose. Some are simply the byproduct of what happens when the boundary between here and there wears thin. The Noppera-bō might be one of those spirits. Their blank face becomes the ultimate mirror, not showing who they are, but forcing you to confront who you are. Because in the absence of features, we project. We imagine anger, grief, sadness, judgment. Or worse, we imagine nothing at all. And that nothingness, it unsettles us more than the rage ever could. Because when a face refuses to show emotion, refuses to tell you what it wants, refuses to let you label it as a friend or a threat, you're left in the dark, wondering, filling the blanks yourself. It asks a much quieter, much harder question than, what did I do wrong? It asks, what am I so afraid to see reflected back at me? So let's sit with this thought for a second. We live in a world where faces are everywhere. Profile pictures, video calls, billboards, selfies. We define ourselves and each other by what we see. By smiles, by glances, by the way someone's eyes light up, just simply by their expression. The face is how we read people. It's how we tell who's safe, who's dangerous, who's familiar. It's the shortcut our brain is used to feel connected or just to stay guarded. And when that face is taken away, when there's nothing left to read, to understand, to empathize with, it's not just unsettling. Doesn't it feel a bit isolating? That's the idea of the faceless spirit that keeps echoing through our stories, not just in Japan, but all around the world. One of the most iconic modern nods is in Studio Ghibli's Spirited Away. The character No Face, that quiet, blank, masked spirit who seems so empty at first, but quickly reveals how dangerous loneliness and hunger for connection can become, carries the same eerie aura as the Noppera-bō. You'll find echoes of them in Japan, in horror films just as like The Grudge, and faceless entities weave through anime, manga, and even video games. And it's not just Japan. In Western internet folklore, you have Slender Man. Tall, thin, faceless, and terrifying, not because of what he does, but because of what you can't see. Even in Avatar, The Last Airbender brought the sphere to life with Ko, the face stealer, an ancient spirit who literally takes your face if you show any emotion in front of him. Ko doesn't scream at you, he doesn't chase, he just waits, leaving you silent, blank, and unreadable. And that's somehow much worse. Because when you strip away the familiar, when you remove the one thing that lets us know we're seen and known, what's left is something much harder to fight. Uncertainty, isolation, the gnawing fear that no matter how close someone stands beside you, you'll never really know what's behind their eyes. And that's why the Noppera-bō still lingers. Not just in old ghost stories, but everywhere in the fear of losing connection that still haunts us. Maybe the Noppera-bō's purpose isn't here to chase us. Maybe they're here to remind us that not all fears arrive loudly. Some simply wait, patient and unseen, until we're ready to face them. And by the time we notice, they're already close. But fear isn't the only thing that lingers. So does resilience. So does that quiet strength we carry, even when we doubt it's there. And sometimes, surviving the unseen has its own kind of victory. Still, not every shadow in the dark is patient. Not every second chance is honored. On the next episode, we step into a story where choices don't just ripple, they crash. A man at the height of forgiveness, a moment of staggering arrogance, a fall that still echoes across myth. We'll meet Ixion, a figure who had every reason to rise and every warning not to fall. But sometimes it's not the enemies we need to fear the most, it's the weight of our own hungers pulling us under. So if you've ever wondered how far a mistake can take you, or how heavy the cost of a second chance can become, trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. I'm June, and this has been The Mythical Madam. Thank you for wandering into the strange, the forgotten, and almost too familiar with me today. I'll see you next time, and until then, keep your eyes open, because not every downfall begins with a roar. Sometimes it starts with a whisper. And if something feels off, you're probably right. If you enjoyed this episode, please let me know and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. And make sure to leave your comments if you're listening on Spotify. Don't miss out on a single episode. Episodes dropping bi-weekly, so make sure to subscribe on the show on Substack at Mythical Madam and my YouTube channel. The Mythical Madam is produced and edited in partnership with Andy Lara at sunfacemedia.com. I'm incredibly grateful for the collaboration and support in bringing these stories to life. All of this and more linked in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.